Welcome to Southwest Desert, where adventure meets the arid beauty of the American Southwest. Join us as we explore the rugged landscapes, uncover hidden historical gems, and dive deep into the rich legends and culture of this iconic region. Subscribe now and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out on our latest desert adventures. Please leave a like or comment. This is very helpful. Let's journey together into the heart of the Southwest Desert. Picture this. You're driving through the American Southwest and see a historical marker for the Old Spanish Trail. You might think this was an ancient pathway carved by Spanish conquistadors, worn smooth by their horses as they explored the New World. You would be completely wrong. The truth behind the Old Spanish Trail is far darker and involves one of the most systematically ignored chapters in American history. A chapter written in the blood and tears of indigenous children torn from their families and sold into bondage. This isn't the romanticized story of exploration that history books tell. This is how economic greed, religious conversion, and colonial ambition created a highway of human suffering across the American West. Welcome to Southwest Desert. Today, we're uncovering the real story behind the Old Spanish Trail, a trail that wasn't really Spanish, wasn't really old, and served a purpose that will shock you. The name Old Spanish Trail is misleading. When Spanish colonial rule ended in the early 1800s, no European had completed a full traversal of this route. The Mexican Revolution had already reshaped the Southwest before this became a major thoroughfare. Ironically, significant portions were mapped by an American explorer from New York. The trail wasn't a single road either. Like most Western routes, it was a network of pathways that converged and diverged, resembling natural patterns that livestock follow to water. These routes were carved not by Spanish cavalry, but by wildlife migration patterns followed for centuries by indigenous peoples who understood the land long before any European arrived. To understand how this network became a conduit for human trafficking, we return to 1598, when Juan de Oñate established San Gabriel, the first Spanish settlement north of modern Mexico. Located where the Chama River meets the Rio Grande, 30 miles north of future Santa Fe, San Gabriel represented Spain's first serious colonization attempt in the Southwest. But San Gabriel was designed as an extraction economy hub. The Spanish brought their colonial model from the Caribbean, a system called encomienda, essentially crown-granted estates where colonists were supposed to Christianize and civilize indigenous inhabitants. In practice, encomienda was slavery with religious veneer. 40 miles upstream sat Taos Pueblo, already a thriving commercial center facilitating trade between Ute Indians and Plains tribes. The Spanish immediately recognized they could tap into these networks, but would transform them into something sinister. When San Gabriel failed, the Spanish regrouped. In 1610, Pedro de Peralta established Santa Fe in a better location. Santa Fe was destined to become the Southwest commercial center, but geography isolated it from major population centers. The Spanish needed their own economic network and valuable commodities to make it profitable. By 1630, the Spanish had established 25 missions throughout Pueblo territories, claiming 60,000 converts from 90 pueblos with 50 active priests. On the surface, these missions promoted Christianity and literacy. Underneath was an economic engine designed to generate colonial wealth. Missionaries introduced horses and firearms as coveted trade items while systematically impoverishing indigenous communities. They demanded excessive crop portions, concentrated populations in controllable mission centers, and created conditions where many had no choice but to participate in activities they would otherwise never consider. The Spanish had learned from earlier colonial experiences. Adult indigenous captives made poor slaves, too likely to resist or die from brutal conditions. But children raised in captivity became docile and compliant. They made superior servants, had better survival rates, and by the late 16th century, trading indigenous children became highly profitable. Market prices tell the story starkly. An 8-year-old girl could bring $400 in Mexico City, an enormous sum. Boys brought $200 or more. Intelligence, appearance, and tractability determined pricing, and these market forces directly influenced which routes traders took and which communities they targeted. This reveals how colonial systems turned indigenous peoples against each other for economic survival. The Ute Indians controlled territory from Colorado's Rockies to Utah's Wasatch Range, bordering Nevada's Great American Desert. This positioned them strategically near the Paiute Indians, who lived in small, scattered communities throughout Nevada and southern Utah. The Paiutes were what pioneers called diggers, considered among North America's most vulnerable indigenous groups. They lived in simple shelters, survived on subsistence diets of small animals and roots, and had minimal tribal organization. Their weapons, basic clubs and simple bows, were no match for organized warfare tactics. The Utes, facing Spanish colonial pressure and seeing economic opportunity, began systematic raids on Paiute communities. These weren't random violence. They were carefully planned economic operations. Every spring, when Paiutes were weakened by winter starvation, Ute raiders attacked small settlements. They eliminated adult males and older boys who might resist, then captured young women and children for transport and sale. The logistics were complex. Raiders transported human cargo across the Wasatch Mountains, found safe river crossings at the Green and Colorado rivers, then journeyed through southwest Colorado to Spanish settlements along the Rio Grande. This network required knowledge, planning, and coordination, and was devastatingly effective. Paiute children who survived found themselves in a completely alien world. Torn from families, communities, and cultures, they were forced into Spanish households facing choices between compliance and punishment, adaptation and resistance. The Spanish preferred these children because they were young enough to be molded. Captured when their languages and cultural identities were still forming, they could be forced to learn Spanish, adopt Catholic practices, and perform domestic or manual labor. The trauma is almost incomprehensible. These children watched parents and siblings murdered, were marched hundreds of miles from everything familiar, then expected to serve the very people who destroyed their families. By the mid-17th century, this had reached full-scale operations with regular routes, established prices, and predictable seasonal patterns. This exploitation system couldn't continue without resistance. The breaking point came in 1680, when Pueblo medicine man Pope organized the Pueblo Revolt. The uprising was swift and coordinated. 400 Spanish colonists died, 25% of New Mexico's Spanish population. The remaining Spanish fled to El Paso, and colonial infrastructure was systematically destroyed. For 12 years, Spanish control was completely broken. Slave trade networks were disrupted, and indigenous communities experienced brief autonomy. But the Spanish returned with vengeance. From 1692 to 1698, they waged 6 years of continuous warfare to re-establish control. When they succeeded, they hadn't abandoned their exploitative economic model. The slave trade officially reopened in 1694. Some groups like Rio Grande Pueblos eventually reconciled with Spanish rule. Others like the Hopis maintained peaceful isolation. Navajos and Comanches remained permanently hostile. The Utes resisted religious reconversion but maintained willingness to trade Paiute captives for horses, mules, and firearms. Economic incentives remained and networks quickly re-established. This history explains why the old Spanish trail followed its routes. It wasn't chosen for scenic beauty or easy travel. It was selected based on cold economic calculations about human trafficking networks, which communities were most vulnerable, which routes allowed safe captive transport, and which destinations offered highest prices for human beings. The trail connected Spanish settlements with indigenous territories not for pottery or textile trade, but for trading children. It established permanent transportation corridors later used for other purposes, but its original function was moving human cargo from capture points to markets. The next time you see an old Spanish trail marker, remember the real history is far more complex than simple exploration narratives. This trail represents not just movement across the American landscape, but the movement of power, enforcement of colonial control, and human cost of exploitation-based economic systems. Join my Patreon community and discover my art print products on my website in the links provided in my description and link above. Also, if you would like a particular image from my videos, give the timestamp for image, and I will upload it to my website and Patreon. Thank you for joining your desert frontiersman Alan for another Southwest story. Check out my large catalog of Southwest videos and playlists on historical tales, legends, lost gold stories, and adult bedtime stories. If you like a certain image from my videos, tell me in comments and give timestamp. Happy trails. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more great content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.